The time has come for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to consider serious legal recourse against Angela Levin and GB News for their inflammatory rhetoric surrounding the couple's humanitarian visit to Jordan. Throughout their charitable work, a mission fundamentally rooted in compassion and global responsibility, Meghan has been subjected to deeply troubling commentary that, honestly, transcends ordinary criticism and ventures into territory that actively incites violence and hostility. Angela Levin's persistent attacks, amplified by GB News's platform, have created a dangerous environment where vitriol masquerades as commentary, and where the line between critique and incitement becomes, well, dangerously blurred. The couple's humanitarian efforts deserve to be discussed with the basic respect afforded to any individuals engaging in philanthropic work, yet instead they have faced a relentless barrage designed not to engage substantively with their initiatives, but rather to delegitimize and demean. Legal action represents not merely a personal defense, but a necessary statement that rhetoric capable of inciting violence cannot be shielded under the guise of free speech, and that those who profit from manufacturing outrage must be held accountable for the real-world consequences of their words. For the Sussexes, pursuing this avenue would send a powerful message that their family's safety and well-being cannot be treated as acceptable collateral damage in the pursuit of ratings and relevance. Legal accountability for dangerous rhetoric, the case against GB News and Angela Levin. During what should have been a focused humanitarian mission to Jordan, Meghan faced a barrage of violence-inciting comments that were amplified through GB News's platform, transforming a charitable visit into a concerning security matter. The inflammatory statements, particularly those emanating from commentator Angela Levin, didn't merely constitute harsh criticism or disagreement. They crossed a dangerous threshold by actively encouraging violence against the Duchess, thereby creating legitimate safety concerns for both Meghan and Prince Harry. This escalating rhetoric, broadcast to a substantial audience, represents more than isolated commentary. It constitutes a pattern of incitement that has made the Sussexes' public engagement increasingly perilous. When media platforms choose to amplify voices calling for violence rather than exercising editorial responsibility, they become complicit in the danger they help create. The time has come for Harry and Meghan to pursue legal action against both Angela Levin and GB News, not merely as a matter of personal protection, but as a necessary measure to hold accountable those who weaponize their platforms to endanger public figures, and by extension set a troubling precedent for how media outlets can irresponsibly handle inflammatory content. The escalating pattern of targeted harassment against Meghan during humanitarian work. The harmful rhetoric directed at Meghan has taken on an increasingly dangerous character, characterized by specific violent language and explicit threats that go far beyond mere criticism or disagreement. Across multiple broadcasts on GB News, a pattern of inflammatory commentary has emerged with alarming consistency, wherein commentators have weaponized inflammatory language to demean and delegitimize her charitable endeavors. What makes this campaign particularly insidious is its deliberate timing and targeting. These attacks have been strategically intensified precisely when Meghan and Prince Harry have been engaged in vulnerable humanitarian work, such as their recent visit to Jordan, where they were focused on addressing critical social issues. The coordination between these inflammatory broadcasts and moments of genuine charitable impact suggests a calculated effort to undermine their work and expose Meghan to potential harm during periods when she is most visible and consequently most exposed to the vitriol of those incited by such rhetoric. This is not random online discourse. Rather, it represents a systematic campaign of harassment that conflates political disagreement with calls for violence, creating a dangerous environment where vulnerable rhetoric transforms into actionable threats against a public figure engaged in meaningful humanitarian service. Legal recourse against harmful rhetoric, a case for action. The pattern of inflammatory statements directed at Meghan and Prince Harry demands serious legal consideration, particularly given the multiple statutory grounds available for action against both Angela and GB News. Defamation and libel claims present a compelling avenue, as false statements made with actual malice, especially those disseminated through a media platform, can cause demonstrable harm to reputation and warrant legal remedy. Beyond reputational damage, the more alarming dimension involves incitement to violent statutes, which many jurisdictions recognise as actionable offences when rhetoric crosses the threshold from criticism into encouraging harmful conduct against specific individuals. The documented nature of Angela's commentary, particularly surrounding the Jordan humanitarian visit, may well meet these legal thresholds. Additionally, harassment and threatening communication laws provide further protective mechanisms, as persistent campaigns of intimidating or threatening language, whether direct or implied, constitute criminal conduct in numerous jurisdictions. The cumulative weight of these legal grounds suggests that the Sussexes have viable paths forward, and pursuit of such action would not merely defend their personal safety and dignity, but also establish important precedent regarding media accountability and the responsibilities of public commentators to refrain from rhetoric that endangers others. The relentless campaign of violence-inciting rhetoric directed at Meghan during her and Prince Harry's humanitarian mission in Jordan has precipitated a genuine crisis that extends far beyond mere criticism or disagreement. The personal safety threats emanating from Angela's inflammatory broadcasts on GB News have necessitated heightened security measures that fundamentally compromise the couple's ability to move freely and engage authentically with vulnerable communities they seek to serve. Beyond the immediate physical dangers, the psychological toll of such sustained hostility cannot be overstated. The constant barrage of dehumanizing language and explicit calls for harm create an environment of perpetual vigilance and trauma that affects not only the Sussexes themselves, but reverberates through their entire household and support network. Furthermore, this toxic discourse directly interferes with their humanitarian work and public duties, as resources must be diverted from meaningful charitable endeavours to address security protocols and legal threats, while communities in need find their access to royal patronage and attention diminished by the necessity of protective measures. It is evident that Angela's rhetoric, amplified through the platform of GB News, has crossed the threshold from protected speech into dangerous incitement, leaving the Sussexes with little recourse but to pursue legal action as a matter of both personal protection and principle, a step that becomes not merely advisable but imperative when media outlets facilitate threats to public figures' safety and obstruct their humanitarian contributions. Angela's position as a prominent commentator carries with it a significant responsibility that she has repeatedly failed to uphold, particularly regarding her inflammatory statements about Meghan during the couple's humanitarian mission to Jordan. Rather than using her platform to foster constructive dialogue, she has demonstrated a troubling pattern of problematic commentary that goes beyond legitimate criticism and ventures into territory designed to provoke hostility toward the Duchess. Each inflammatory remark builds upon the last, creating a cumulative effect that normalizes increasingly dangerous rhetoric among her audience. By leveraging her visibility on GB News, Angela has effectively weaponized her commentary, transforming personal opinions into a broadcast mechanism for spreading rhetoric that endangers the Sussexes' safety and reputation. This is not merely about one ill-considered statement. It represents a calculated pattern of behavior that has crossed the threshold from commentary into incitement, raising serious questions about both individual accountability and platform responsibility. The question now facing both Angela and her network is whether they will take meaningful action to address this pattern, or whether continued amplification of such dangerous messaging will necessitate legal intervention to protect the Sussexes from ongoing harm. Legal accountability is really at the heart of GB News's institutional responsibility in the Sussex coverage controversy. GB News, you see, bears significant institutional responsibility for the inflammatory commentary directed at Meghan during her and Prince Harry's humanitarian visit to Jordan, particularly when it comes to the network's failures in editorial oversight and content moderation. The platform's insufficient vetting mechanisms, frankly, allowed inflammatory rhetoric to proliferate unchecked. And that does raise some serious questions about the adequacy of their content moderation policies and editorial standards. Beyond just the initial broadcasting of such commentary, GB News actually faces potential platform liability for hosted content that incites violence or harassment against identifiable individuals. A legal principle that, extends beyond mere publication to encompass the network's role in amplifying and platforming such rhetoric. Furthermore, the network owes a duty of care to the subjects of its commentary, in this case Meghan and Harry, to ensure that coverage, particularly when it's critical or controversial, does not cross the threshold into incitement or defamation. The systematic nature of the hostile commentary, combined with GB News's apparent failure to implement adequate safeguards or editorial intervention, really suggests a dereliction of this duty of care. These institutional failures, the breakdown in editorial oversight, the abdication of platform responsibility, and the neglect of duty toward those subjected to commentary, create a compelling case for legal accountability, underscoring why the Sussexes' pursuit of legal action against both the commentator and the network itself may be not merely warranted, but honestly necessary to establish meaningful consequences for such institutional negligence. Legal precedent here is quite telling, and it really does show why Harry and Meghan have strong grounds for action. The legal landscape surrounding media defamation and incitement to violence provides compelling precedent for the Sussexes' potential case against Angela and GB News. Previous victories against media outlets have established clear liability when commentators cross the line from criticism into dangerous rhetoric, particularly when statements specifically incite violence against identifiable individuals. Notable defamation settlements have demonstrated that courts recognize the severe harm caused by coordinated campaigns of inflammatory speech, with damages often reflecting both the reputational injury and the chilling effect such rhetoric has on public figures' ability to conduct their work safely. In cases involving incitement to violence, legal standards have become increasingly robust in protecting individuals from media-amplified threats, especially when the accused outlet either directly encourages hostile action or demonstrates reckless disregard for the foreseeable consequences of inflammatory commentary. The Sussexes' situation, honestly, mirrors these precedents. Angela's rhetoric, amplified through GB News's platform during coverage of their humanitarian work in Jordan, represents precisely the kind of dangerous speech that courts have previously found actionable. These established legal victories demonstrate that media outlets cannot shield themselves from accountability by claiming commentary falls within free speech protections when statements directly endanger specific individuals. Given these precedents, Harry and Meghan possess the legal foundation necessary to hold both Angela and her platform accountable for rhetoric that transforms a public disagreement into a genuine safety concern. Legal recourse against inflammatory media rhetoric in this context calls for a comprehensive strategy. In response to the escalating pattern of violence-inciting commentary directed at Meghan during the Sussex humanitarian mission to Jordan, a comprehensive legal strategy should be pursued on multiple fronts. First, cease and desist notices should be formally issued to Angela and GB News, clearly documenting the inflammatory statements and demanding immediate cessation of such rhetoric, establishing a critical paper trail for any subsequent proceedings. Simultaneously, formal complaints should be lodged with relevant regulatory bodies, including Ofcom in the UK, which has the authority to investigate broadcast standards violations and take disciplinary action against news outlets that permit dangerous incitement on their platforms. Finally, civil litigation options warrant serious consideration. As the Sussexes may have grounds for defamation and negligence, claims given the direct link between platform-amplified rhetoric and real-world safety threats, with legal precedent supporting accountability when media organizations fail in their duty of care to prevent the dissemination of content that places individuals at demonstrable risk of harm. Legal action against incitement is, quite frankly, essential for protecting public figures in the media age. The time for decisive legal intervention has arrived. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle must pursue immediate legal action against Angela Levin and GB News for their relentless campaign of violence-inciting rhetoric, particularly regarding the couple's humanitarian mission to Jordan. A visit dedicated to meaningful charitable work that should have been celebrated, not weaponized as a platform for dangerous commentary. The protection of public figures from incitement to violence represents not merely a personal matter, but a fundamental principle of public safety that demands urgent attention. When media commentators cross the line from criticism into deliberate provocation designed to inflame hostility and potentially inspire harmful actions, they forfeit the shield of free speech and must face legal accountability. Furthermore, media platforms that provide a stage for such inflammatory language bear direct responsibility for amplifying these messages, and both GB News and its contributors must be held answerable for the consequences of platforming rhetoric that poses a genuine threat to the safety and well-being of the Sussexes. Only through comprehensive legal action, targeting both the individual commentators whose words incite violence and the corporate entities that amplify them, can we establish meaningful boundaries that protect public figures while upholding the principle that freedom of expression does not extend to incitement of harm.